All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on building the next generation of active forms with Slice. Slice. So we're in Slice. We're not in planning. We're not in Planning Analytics for Excel. We're not in Perspectives, but we are in Slice. And we have Louis Rincon with us, who is going to present that. And if you have questions for Louis on the way through, please put it in the Q&A chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will get to it towards the end. With that, I think I'll hand over to you, Louis, and take it away, please.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. My name, as Thomas already said, my name is Louis Rincon. I'm from the CubeWise Code team, and I'm going to be presenting building the next generation of active forms with Slice. But I'm going to be starting with explaining what is a Slice for those who don't know. So Slice is essentially a product from CubeWise, which translates into an Excel add-in that is really easy to install, connects to the REST API, and works over the internet. It's really fast and easy, compatible with your previous perspectives reports, and is super intuitive as well. So we're going to be using this add-in to do MDX forms. And you must be wondering, well, what on earth are MDX forms? So that's the next generation of active forms. So we call them MDX forms for very simple reasons. So I'm going to be telling you what the MDX form is all about. What are the components of the MDX form? I'm going to touch slightly on view styles and how you can actually use them in your Excel reports. I'm going to go through the MDX Lab. Super Express MDX Lab is essentially a plugin in Slice or Arc, for that matter, that facilitates the way you can visualize and see the return, what returns on your MDX query. Obviously, we're going to use hierarchies in this example as well. And as a bonus point, we're going to do a quick on-the-fly calculations using calculated members in MDX. Okay, so what is an MDX form? So basically, it's a brand new to build Excel reports, right? For those who are are still used to the active forms, it's very similar, but even simpler. So it's yet a powerful way to combine Excel with TM1. And of course, you can do everything that you can do in Excel as it's standalone, but with the power of TM1 plus the MDX. It's faster, more flexible than traditional active forms. And something I really like is that you can stack dimensions or hierarchies on either rows or columns, doesn't matter. So how does the MDX work? The MDX form work? So that's simple, again, driven by one Excel function, which we're going to go through it briefly. One MDX statement as well, so it makes the report super easy and quite useful. And that means also that creating your report, it's simpler, and you don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining the reports itself, right? You can expand and collapse rows, but particularly columns. This is a feature that a lot of us were waiting for a long time. Now it's available through Slice. And last but not least, like I said before, using calculated members in MDX, right? And as another bonus point, we're going to have inserting two MDX forms in the one report in a blink of an eye. So it's really, really simple. All right, so what are the components of an MDX form? So it's just the one function in Excel called MDX form, surprise. And it has 6 arguments. Basically, the ID of the MDX form, which is automatically assigned, or you can also change it according to whatever naming convention that you use. The server or your TM1 instance, the MDX query itself. Yes, it does provide a write-back capability. Of course, you got to note rules and TM1 security take precedence. You can display any attribute, not only aliases. You can also display text, string attributes, or numeric attributes. And obviously, you have a form and range very similar to what MDX Forms uses. Okay, so no more talking and more doing. So let's go quickly into the demo. So I'm going to go into Excel, and as you can see on the top, I have my Slice toolbar. Don't feel overwhelmed. There are many features for Slice, but as the objective of this session is to show you how to create MDX forms. So I'm going to go into my Slice Explorer. So I have my TM1 instance here, and I'm going to log in. So admin Apple, here I am. So in this case, I'm going to be using a cube called the Listing Analysis Cube. In fact, this cube was created from scratch in the previous session by my colleague Harvey. If you didn't get a chance to watch that session, you can watch the replay, and there'll be other sessions for ARC moving forward as well. So he built basically this Listing Analysis Cube. It's a cube with 2 dimensions. Those 2 dimensions are listing. We're taking an example in which we have different listings in Airbnb, and we're going to analyze the data that comes with them, and the listing analysis measure. Within this listing dimension, we have a few hierarchies. The ones that we're going to be using are hosts, neighborhood, and room type. So basically different ways of looking at our data or our elements in that dimension. Okay, so if I open the listing analysis cube, you'll notice, let me just change that to another view. You'll notice that here it is, my listings grouped by room type for this matter. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the view style that I have for my particular cube that I have open right now. How can you do that? So you can go into this brush-like icon, and I can go into the view style editor through here, or I can actually select different out-of-the-box styles. For example, if I select the ARC style, my whole view style changes. If I go and select legacy, this is a legacy formatting that we used to have back in the extend days. And we can also have the plain back, and so on and so forth. So you can go into the view style editor either this way, or on the left-hand side menu. If I actually collapse my cubes, you'll see at the very bottom, we have tools, and under tools, we have the view style editor as the 5th option as well. So either way, you get to the same place. So let's go into the view style editor. So here in the view style editor, you can actually customize anything that you like here. You can either do it by selecting on the right-hand side the properties for each specific area. In this case, for example, the title area, the cube label, as you can see, is gray. The text color is black, and so on and so forth. You can choose specific fonts and font sizes, and you can actually go and also predefine different borders for that particular property. In this case, I'm going to select something called that I named Horizon. That's the view style for Horizon. And something I really like about Slice is that you can actually click on specific components of your view, and it'll take you to the right level in the properties window, right? So, for example, if I go to the cube server value, then I can see that I have already chosen a color red, the text is white, and so on and so forth. So you can either use the drop down or click on any particular element, and the properties window will change automatically. The last thing also is in the toolbar at the top, you can also hit the edit JSON file, and that's basically the whole properties file in a JSON format that you can actually use and you can share with other fellow developers or TM1 enthusiasts as well, right? With that in mind, I'm going to go back into my listing analysis cube, and now I'm going to check the Horizon formatting that we created. Okay, so it doesn't matter if I change to a different view or a different, the formatting will prevail. So The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export that into an MDX form. And in the MDX form, it's going to ask me whether I want to have a new workbook or insert the form in a existing workbook. But for the time being, I want a new workbook. So click OK, and I have my MDX form already populated in my Excel sheet. And what I'm going to do is unhide everything so we can go through the components of the MDX form. So as you can see, I'm going to expand slightly these columns. And you can actually see that we got our formatting area similar to the active forms that we normally used to. We have our TM1 server and cube. You'll notice there's an MDX query already that's automatically generated by Slice every time you do an export to Excel. This is going to be generated, and of course we have our listings and our different measures across the columns, right? So this is the MDX form function that I was explaining before. And as I said before, we have the ID, we have the server name. On cell B14 is our MDX query. We have the flag to write back set as to 1, of course, taking precedence rules and TM1 security. And we have our format range, right? So in our format range, you'll notice that there's only the one column that drives the entire report. It's something slightly different to active forms, for example. So what I'm going to do is go and copy, go and copy the MDX query, and I'm going to head back to my Slice browser, right, my Slice Explorer. And I'm going to click on something called MDX Lab below. This MDX Lab will show me, I can paste that query that was automatically generated by Slice when I exported my MDX form, select all, and I have a code automatic formatter. There are many options. I'm not going to cover them all. It's not the purpose of this presentation, but it does help you a lot when it comes to making the code more readable. So here it is with the code slightly more readable. If I execute that query, you will notice that it's exactly the same as my cube view, the query, and therefore my report. So that makes things really simple. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and I'm going to go into a more advanced report. So we're going to be seeing the progression of this report as it gets more complicated. So the next step is I'm going to do a bit of tidy up. So as you can see, I have placed my MDX query on the top. I have created a drop-down based on a data validation. How does that, for those who don't know, data validation is just essentially a list that will prompt you for a drop-down menu. So with that, I can actually flick between the different hierarchies that we have currently in the queue. And that will allow us for having a more dynamic report, for example. Let's go into Slice, and I'm going to rebuild the cube here. As you can see, if I switch from a different hierarchy, for example, and rebuild my active form would rebuild accordingly. So I'm going to copy that MDX, and we're going to take a look in our MDX lab, just for you to understand how simple it is to run something like that. All I'm going to do is remove the double quotes from Excel, rerun, and that's the query I was looking into it. But again, I have a neighborhood. If I was to say room type, the way I had it before, and just basically replace that in my MDX query, you will see that it'll return basically the breakdown by room type. So that's what we're doing in our Excel report, but we obviously doing it automatically without having to type anything, right? Replacing text in the MDX query column. So once again, something really simple that probably takes you less than 5 minutes to set up a report like this. So what happens if we want to start stacking different columns or rows, and how complicated would their report start looking like. So once again, the first 3 MDX at the very top of my report are the ones to display the hierarchy on rows. But what I'm going to do now is select, let's say, room type and stack them with the neighborhood hierarchy. So I'm stacking 2 hierarchies, and I want to see all measures across the columns, right? If I go and say replace, you will see that my report would already give me the breakdown through that MDX. So once again, I'm going to copy that MDX, shift back to my MDX lab, paste, remove double quotes, and execute the actual query. And you'll notice that it's exactly the same, with the only difference that I can get to interact with my Excel report by expanding or collapsing columns, right? So, but now let's try to do this and shift something that back with active forms was very challenging to do. Now with MDX forms, if I want to stack, for example, columns, now you can see that my neighborhood has gone onto the columns. I still have my room type on the rows, but I'm stacking a hierarchy / dimension with my measures dimension. And in fact, if I double click, say, for example, in the suburb Manly, I can actually see the expanded version of the numbers that make up to that particular total, right? It's a very simple and easy way to really explore the report by just doing those selections, right? And again, I can flick it back to all measures, and you see that the response is actually fairly quick without having to hack too much, for that matter, on the report itself, right? They're very simple ways to do reporting on Excel. So once again, I'm going to go into my MDX lab, and the next thing I'm going to do is run a simple query in my report. Apologies for that. That is just basically something like top 10 that on my listings. So in here, I'm returning the top 10 listings based on the average price, which is something standard that you would expect on any MDX report, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more complexity and add a on-the-fly calculation using calculated members and MDX. So once again, I'm going to copy that MDX query, go back to my MDX lab, delete, paste, apply formatting pretty quickly so I can read it in a more easy way, and execute the query. So you will notice that in the result, there's some highlighters in red, which indicates that it's a calculated member and not actually an element in the dimension. So that basically highlights the difference. If I actually go back to my report here, click View, and do a quick selections on the fly calculation, and I'm going to calculate estimated revenue. So with that in mind, you can see now we have our calculated MDX member in there without the need of actualizing or the dimension, the measures dimension by any means. No? And obviously we can have other type of calculation, for example, estimated revenue, minimum revenue. And that minimum revenue will also be derived by the members on column J. So again, there are very simple ways that you can do these calculations with MDX members. If I go back to my MDX, you can see that it's just essentially a multiplication doing average price times the availability of that particular listing throughout the year, right? That's how we're calculating the revenue itself. Okay, so and what would happen if I want to insert another MDX form for that matter? So that's actually really simple. all I need to do is go into a blank cell, right click, and in that right click, I'm going to go into the slice menu and say insert MDX form. If I click there, I would have a prompt where I have to select my cube, which in this case is my listing analysis cube, and the view could be anything really. In this case, I'm going to select that view. Once I hit OK, you will notice that I have a second MDX form in the same report, well, with a different formatting. Why is that? It's because I inserted it directly from Excel and not from my cube view. But this is really easy and simple to fix. I'm going to unhide again everything that makes up the second MDX form that I just created, and I'm going to go into my MDX form function. In here, you can see that I'm referring to the formatting area as shown below. So all I'm going to do is grab that and place it into my default highlighting area. Also, my attribute, I'm going to be placing this attribute based to the listing attribute that I have in my default drop-downs. And the last but not least is moving the MDX. So this MDX, I'm going to shift it just to be exactly the same as the other report. So you will see a mirror report embedded in the same report. Hit enter. Obviously, all these rows, I don't need them anymore, so I can actually delete them. And when I hit refresh or reveal sheet, you will see two of the same reports, right? It doesn't matter what I actually select here. Let's go back and look at the room type dimension and reveal that. You have the two of them. So if I actually go and drill down on the hotel room, for example, you will notice that each part of the MDX form, it works independently, right? So I can actually go and now expand the other one. So that makes the report also quicker as well for you to browse and play with. So again, they're very simple tips and easy manners to build MDX reports. So you actually get to have something like this, right? Hiding the rows and the columns. So you allow the user to be switching into a different ways of reporting, different selections, and it's all driven by MDX. So once again, it reduces the amount of complexity that sometimes active forms can get to in order to find workarounds, and it makes the report really, really, really quick, right? So once again, it's a very easy way to start shifting from one place to another without having to have a messy or, let's say, more complicated Excel report. Okay. So I'm going to head back now to Q&A and head back to Thomas for that matter. I think you're on mute, Thomas.
Oh, that's not very good. Thank you.
That's okay.
There are a few questions being asked, and Andre has kindly enough answered a few of them. There is one in the Q&A section, which is basically asking about performance. I think probably the question is probably you're working on a small cube, but what in the real world when you have for example, an 8 to 12 dimensional cube, will there be a significant drop in performance? Is the question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Of course, the more data you have in your cube, the more it'll take the toll on performance, but it would be a matter of fraction of a seconds, right? The amount of dimensions does not limit the performance of the MDX forms. It's more the data that lies beneath the query itself.
All right. I'll also point out for any questions that are unanswered, or if you feel you need more. I see Ardian, for example, have asked quite a few questions online. Like there's always the possibility to go to the hands-on session in Sydney next week, next Tuesday. You can deep dive into specific questions there and try things out for yourself, guided, of course. And also you can reach out to Luis or Andre directly on the platform today and ask you more specific questions, or if you don't feel you've got an adequate answer right now. We do have a question here. We probably got time for that. So the question goes, is there any similar tool like TM1 Web to publish these forms online for internal stakeholders?
Right. At the moment, the MDX form function is only available through Slice. So clearly that's not actually compatible if you were to publish that form in TM1 Web yet. But we're looking into the future as to see what else it is that we can actually do about that. But for the moment, no, it's simply an Excel report for the time being.
All right, I'll just go. There's something going on in the Q&A. I think we've got time for maybe one more. Okay, so we have a question here. Is it possible to place multiple MDX queries in columns rather than rows, i.e. side by side rather than below?
Yeah, that's right. You can stack all the multiple hierarchies on rows and columns. There's no limit for it, as long as your MDX query allows for it or is written in that manner. Then the report will respond accordingly.
I see Andre is answering the question in a similar vein, so that's good. All right, let's just see if there's one last thing here. A few things going on. I think in the interest of time, I think we need to move on so people can get on to the next presentations. For you guys who have unanswered questions, please reach out directly to Luis or Andre after this presentation. And other than that, of course, come to the Sydney hands-on session next Tuesday. That would be the absolute best solution. So I think with that, I think I'll hand it over to you, Luis.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining this presentation. I hope we gave you a bit of an insight of what is it that you can do with MDX forms. And, well, that was me, Luis Rincon, presenting building the next generation of active forms in Slice. And good to see you, everybody. And always remember to do good TM1. See you in the next one.